Welcome to Tales of the Bard. Step into a world where stories come alive and imagination knows no bounds. Join me as I weave enchanting tales reminiscent of the bards of old, sharing legends, myths, and original stories that will transport you to distant lands and forgotten times. The tavern was packed that evening, with patrons gathered from every corner of the realm to hear the latest tale of Ronan and Lira. The bond between the young druid and the princess had captivated the hearts of all who had heard of their adventures. Jonty the bard sat by the fire, his lute in hand, ready to recount the story of a bittersweet farewell that had left both Ronan and Lira forever changed. The farewell at the Druid Grove. Jonty strummed a soft, mournful tune, letting the melody carry the emotions of the tale. After many battles fought side by side and many secrets shared beneath the stars, the time came when Ronan and Lira had to part ways. Duty, as it often does, called them in different directions, pulling them apart despite the growing bond between them. The bard's voice softened, filled with the weight of the moment. Ronan stood at the edge of the Druid Grove, his hand resting on the neck of his loyal Windstrider, the graceful creature that had carried him through many perils. The winds whispered through the towering blue trees, their leaves glowing softly in the evening light. This place, the heart of Ronan's druidic magic, was where he needed to be, where his responsibilities to the wilds called him. Jonty's fingers moved gently over the lute strings as he painted the scene. Lira, standing beside him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resolve, knew she had to return to her father, King Alistair, at the castle. The kingdom needed her, especially now, as threats from the hag-born witches and dark forces continued to rise. But her heart ached at the thought of leaving Ronan behind. The bard's voice dropped to a near whisper. For a long moment they stood in silence, the weight of their unspoken words hanging between them. Both knew that their duties came first. Both knew that the paths they walked were necessary, but knowing did not make it easier. The struggle to say goodbye. The music shifted to a more poignant, emotional melody reflecting the struggle they faced. Ronan, ever the druid, tried to keep his emotions in check, but as he looked at Lira, he found himself unable to hide the depth of his feelings. "I will miss you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Lira, ever strong, smiled sadly, her hand gripping the Amulet of Cæruleus that hung around her neck, the amulet Ronan had crafted for her, a connection to the Druid Blue Tree network. Jonty smiled softly, his voice filled with warmth as he continued. Lira touched the amulet gently, the blue stone catching the fading light of the day. "As will I," she replied, her voice steady despite the sadness in her eyes. "But we will not be far apart. I can still hear your voice whenever I hold this." The bard's music grew softer, more intimate. The amulet had become more than just a gift. It was a lifeline, a way for them to stay connected even when miles separated them. Ronan had enchanted the amulet with druidic magic, allowing them to speak across distances, to hear one another's thoughts and feelings. Whenever Lira held it close, she could sense Ronan's presence, his connection to the wilds, and the steady rhythm of his heart. A promise to keep in touch. The melody lifted, carrying a sense of hope through the sorrow. And so, with a final embrace, they parted. Ronan mounted his Windstrider, the creature's powerful wings lifting them into the sky, the wind carrying them away from the grove. Lira watched as he soared above the treetops, his silhouette growing smaller against the fading sun. Her heart clenched, but she knew this was not the end. Jonty's voice was filled with the promise of reunion. Ronan turned back one last time, his eyes meeting Lira's as he hovered in the air. "I'll always be with you," he said, his voice carried on the wind. "Whenever you need me, just hold the amulet." Lira nodded, clutching the stone tightly. "And I will be here when you return," she called out, her voice strong and sure. The bard strummed a gentle chord, allowing the moment to linger. With a final glance, Ronan urged his Windstrider onward, disappearing into the horizon. Lira stood there for a moment longer, watching until he was out of sight before turning back to her own path. She had her duties to fulfill, her kingdom to protect, but in her heart, she carried the comfort of knowing that she and Ronan would always be connected. Their separate journeys. Jonty's music shifted, becoming more triumphant as he spoke of their respective duties. Ronan returned to the Druid Grove, where the ancient blue trees awaited him. His task was to strengthen the Blue Tree network, to protect the wilds from the rising darkness, and to commune with the creatures of the land. His powers, now stronger than ever, were needed to keep the balance of nature intact. The bard's voice took on a note of pride as he spoke of Lira. Lira, meanwhile, returned to her father's castle, the great stone walls standing tall and proud as ever. But the kingdom was restless, the shadows of the hag-born witches growing ever nearer. Lira knew that she had a responsibility not only to her people, but to the alliances she had helped forge. She would not sit idly by while the world around her changed. Her strength, her courage, these were the tools she would use to defend her home. Jonty smiled as he played a lighter tune. Though their paths took them in different directions, they remained close. Whenever Lira felt the weight of her duties, she would hold the amulet and hear Ronan's voice, calm and reassuring. And whenever Ronan found himself deep in the heart of the wilds, he would sense Lira's strength and resolve, carried to him through the magic of the amulet. A bond that could not be broken. The bard's music grew softer, more intimate, as he brought the tale to its conclusion. Though they were apart, Ronan and Lira's bond grew even stronger. They had faced many dangers together, and though their duties required separation, their hearts remained entwined. The Amulet of Cæruleus was more than just a magical tool. It was a symbol of their connection, a reminder that no matter how far apart they were, they would always find their way back to one another. Jonty's voice carried a sense of peace and hope. And so, with every battle fought and every challenge faced, they kept each other close, bound by the magic of the wilds and the strength of their hearts. The world around them might change, but their bond was unbreakable. The patrons sat in quiet reflection as Jonty finished, the soft notes of his lute lingering in the air. The story of Ronan and Lira's farewell, their struggle to say goodbye, and their promise to keep in touch, had touched the hearts of everyone in the room. Though their paths had diverged, their love and connection remained strong, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could always be found. Jonty, with a final smile and a bow, stood and left the tavern, leaving behind a room full of wonder and admiration for the love shared between Ronan and Lira, two souls bound by duty, destiny, and the magic of the wilds. The tavern was warm and alive with chatter, but when Jonty returned to his seat by the fire, the noise quickly died down. His lute, resting against his leg, hummed softly as he strummed a few notes, and the patrons leaned in, eager to hear the continuation of Ronan and Lira's story. There was always something mystical in the air whenever their tale was told, and tonight would be no different. Jonty's eyes gleamed in the firelight as he began his tale, his voice carrying a hint of wonder and magic. The Silver Hawk's silent message. Even though they were far apart, Ronan in the heart of the Druid Grove and Lira at her father's castle, there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when they were reminded of each other in ways that could not be explained by ordinary magic. Jonty's fingers moved lightly over the lute strings, creating a soft, ethereal melody, the kind that whispered of things unseen. Whenever Ronan walked through the grove, tending to the ancient blue trees, he would occasionally feel a tingle at the back of his neck, a subtle shiver that made him stop in his tracks. The bard's voice lowered, drawing his audience closer. In those moments, he would look up, scanning the sky above the towering trees, and there in the distance, he would catch sight of it, a swift silver hawk, its feathers glimmering like moonlight. It circled above him just for a breath, before disappearing into the clouds. Jonty smiled as he continued. Ronan would watch the hawk, his heart stirring with a deep sense of familiarity, though he could never be certain of what it meant. But in his soul, he knew Lira. The bard's fingers picked up the tempo, mimicking the beat of wings. Lira, too, would experience something similar. As she stood on the battlements of her father's castle, looking out over the distant horizon, she would sometimes feel her amulet vibrate gently against her chest. It was a soft, almost imperceptible pulse, but she knew what it meant. Jonty's eyes sparkled as he described the moment. Her hand would instinctively reach for the Amulet of Cæruleus, and as her fingers closed around it, she would look to the sky. There, for the briefest moment, she would see it, a silver hawk, swift and silent, soaring high above the castle walls. Its form would shimmer against the sunlight, and before she could fully comprehend it, the hawk would vanish, leaving only the soft hum of the amulet in her hand. A sign of their connection. The bard's music slowed, becoming more thoughtful as he described the unspoken bond between Ronan and Lira. Neither of them ever spoke of the hawk, not even when they used the amulet to send messages to one another. It was as if they both knew that the hawk was something more, something beyond words. A sign, perhaps, of their deep connection, a reminder that even though they walked separate paths, their souls were never truly apart. Jonty's voice grew soft, filled with wonder. The silver hawk was no ordinary bird. Its appearance was too perfect, too timely, to be mere coincidence. Some believed it was the work of the Blue Tree Network, a manifestation of the magic that linked the Druids to the natural world. Others whispered that it was Skryla, the ancient Druid, watching over them, guiding them in subtle ways as they fulfilled their destinies. The patrons leaned in closer, captivated by the mystery of the hawk. Jonty's fingers danced lightly over the strings, the melody reflecting the hawk's graceful flight through the sky. "Whatever the truth may be," Jonty said, his voice carrying the weight of the unknown, Ronan and Lira found comfort in the hawk's presence. In those brief moments when the hawk appeared and then vanished, they were reminded that they were still connected, even across great distances. A symbol of hope. Jonty's music shifted to a more uplifting, hopeful tune. The silver hawk became a symbol of hope for them both, a quiet reassurance that they were not alone. Even in the midst of their duties, Ronan tending to the wilds, Lira protecting her kingdom, the hawk's appearance reminded them of the bond they shared. The bard smiled as he described how the hawk continued to appear at the most unexpected times. When Ronan was deep in meditation, sitting beneath the ancient blue trees, he would feel that familiar tingle and look up to see the hawk gliding silently through the branches. And when Lira was in the middle of a council meeting with her father, discussing matters of the kingdom, she would suddenly feel the amulet hum against her skin, and she would know that the hawk had passed overhead, unseen by all but her. Jonty's voice grew softer as he added, "It was a fleeting connection, yes, but it was enough. It was enough to remind them that they were still walking this path together, even when they were far apart." A mystery left unsolved. The patrons listened in silence as Jonty brought the tale to a close. His music faded into a soft, lingering note as he spoke of the hawk's mystery. The truth of the silver hawk's origins remained a mystery. Some believed it was a spirit sent by the blue trees, a messenger of nature watching over them. Others thought it was the magic of their love, manifesting in the form of the hawk to keep them connected. The bard's eyes gleamed as he added, and perhaps in the end, it didn't matter what the hawk truly was. What mattered was what it represented, the unbreakable bond between Ronan and Lira, a bond that transcended distance, duty, and even time. Jonty strummed a final chord on his lute, letting the music hang in the air. The patrons, still lost in the magic of the story, sat in quiet contemplation, their minds filled with the image of the swift silver hawk, a fleeting but powerful reminder of love and connection. With a bow and a smile, Jonty left the tavern, leaving behind the haunting memory of the silver hawk, a symbol of hope, love, and the mysteries that tied Ronan and Lira together, no matter how far apart they were. The tavern was filled with the soft crackle of the hearth as the patrons leaned in, hanging on Jonty's every word. The silver hawk, this mysterious, fleeting figure that had appeared in the skies over Ronan and Lira, had captivated their imaginations. Yet as the tale continued, a deeper truth was about to be revealed, one that only a few could have guessed. Jonty smiled knowingly, letting his fingers play a few quiet notes on the lute. His eyes scanned the room, making sure everyone was paying attention before he finally spoke again. The watchful silver hawk. For some time, Ronan and Lira had wondered about the silver hawk, Jonty began, his voice soft but filled with intrigue. Its appearances were too perfect, too timely to be coincidence. It seemed to arrive at just the right moments, watching over them as they went about their separate duties. Both had felt its presence, but neither knew the truth of its origin. The bard's fingers moved slowly over the strings, creating a melody that carried the weight of ancient magic. But the truth, my friends, was that the silver hawk was no ordinary creature. It was not a wild animal or a mere symbol of their connection. No, the silver hawk was something far greater. Someone far greater. The hawk was none other than Skryla, the ancient druid, watching over them from afar. The patrons gasped softly, surprised by the revelation. Jonty smiled, pleased with their reaction, and continued. Skryla, you see, had known from the very beginning that Ronan and Lira were destined for greatness. The bond they shared, their bravery in the face of danger, and their deep connection to the natural world, these were not mere accidents of fate. Skryla had sensed something special in them, something that went beyond their individual strengths. Skryla's watchful eye. Jonty's music shifted, becoming more mysterious, more ancient, as he described the power of Skryla. Skryla had long protected the Blue Tree Network, and through her deep connection to nature, she had the ability to take many forms. The hawk was just one of the many creatures she could become, but it was the form she chose to watch over Ronan and Lira. The bard's voice filled with reverence as he spoke of the ancient druid. In her hawk form, Skryla could soar above the treetops, her sharp eyes watching over the land, her keen senses attuned to any danger that might approach. And more than that, through her connection to the blue trees, she could sense the very destiny that bound Ronan and Lira together. Jonty's fingers played a soft, soaring melody, mimicking the flight of the hawk. Whenever Ronan felt that tingle at the back of his neck, and whenever Lira felt her amulet vibrate, it was Skryla, watching them from above. She never lingered for long, just long enough to make sure they were safe, to remind them that they were not alone in their journey. Destined for greatness. The bard's music grew softer, more intimate as he described the deeper meaning behind Skryla's watchful presence. Skryla knew that Ronan and Lira were destined for something far greater than either of them could yet see. The challenges they had faced, the battles, the separation, the trials, they were only the beginning of a much larger journey. Skryla watched over them, not just as a guardian, but as a guide, ensuring that their paths remained intertwined, for their destinies were linked in ways even they could not fully understand. Jonty's eyes gleamed as he spoke of the prophecy that had long been whispered among the druids. The blue trees had foretold of a time when two souls, bound by love and duty, would rise to protect the natural world from a darkness greater than any that had come before. Skryla had known, from the moment she first sensed their bond, that Ronan and Lira were those two souls. Their love, their courage, and their connection to the wilds were the key to restoring balance to the world. A subtle guide. Jonty's music took on a more hopeful, uplifting tone as he continued. But Skryla was wise. She knew that their journey was their own to walk, and that her role was not to interfere but to guide them when needed. The hawk was her way of watching over them without disrupting their choices, a reminder that they were never truly alone. The bard's voice grew more reverent as he spoke of Skryla's role in their story. Whenever Ronan felt lost, unsure of the path ahead, he would look up and see the hawk, its wings gliding effortlessly through the air. It gave him strength, a quiet assurance that he was on the right path. And whenever Lira felt the weight of her duties pressing down on her, she would feel her amulet hum, and she would know that the hawk was watching, that Skryla was with her in spirit. Jonty's fingers danced over the strings, creating a melody that reflected the lightness of hope and the depth of destiny. Through the hawk, Skryla whispered to them, reminding them of their purpose. And though they did not always understand the full extent of what was to come, they trusted in the hawk's presence, knowing that it was a sign of something greater. A future yet to unfold. The bard's music grew softer, more contemplative, as he brought the tale to its conclusion. And so, Skryla continued to watch over Ronan and Lira, her silver wings carrying her across the skies, her sharp eyes keeping them safe. She knew that their greatest challenges were yet to come, but she also knew that they had the strength to face them, together. Jonty smiled as he finished his tale, his voice filled with both mystery and hope. The silver hawk was more than just a fleeting presence. It was a symbol of their connection, their destiny, and the great purpose that awaited them. Skryla would be the always watching, always guiding, until the day came when they would need her no longer. The patrons sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Skryla, the ancient druid, had been with Ronan and Lira all along, watching from afar, ensuring that they stayed on the path that would lead them to their true destiny. As Jonty strummed the final notes of his lute, the tavern erupted into applause, the sound echoing off the walls. The story of the Silver Hawk had taken on new meaning, and the patrons now understood just how deep the connection between Ronan and Lira truly was. With a final bow and a knowing smile, Jonty left the tavern, leaving behind a room full of wonder and awe. Skryla's watchful eye was ever present, guiding Ronan and Lira toward their fate, a fate that would one day shape the future of the realm.